We're discussing navigating audiovisual digitization, preservation, and we're celebrating World Day for Audiovisual Heritage, a window to the world. So a quick introduction. So why is it important to digitize? And so audiovisual digitization is essential. It holds our cultural legacy, who we are, our practices. And with digitalization, you enhance the access of what is there. It also helps foster innovation and makes sharing and engaging with others within ourselves a lot easier. So the elements that are, the pillars of what we do is preservation, accessibility, restoration, making everything searchable, integration and innovation are critical these days. And then again, cultural heritage, and of course, the use of this material for educational purposes, right? So we'll go into depth with anything related to this event in these following sections. So the first section we'll tackle today is the identification of media types. There are so many media types out there. We'll only focus on a very few, right? But we'll give you a quick idea, and I'll also keep all the references for everywhere you could go, right, online, and explore yourselves where you can find that medium, right? So identification is primarily the first step. You have to identify what you've got. So whether you're preserving it or you're digitizing it, you need to identify what you're holding. So that's number one. Two, storage of physical archives. How do you store what you have, right? And then number three is how to navigate through digitalization of multimedia formats. What hardware do you need in order to digitalize? Do you even need to digitalize? These are some of the questions, very important, critical questions we'll be answering today. And then section number four, selecting parameters for digitization. So what software should we use? And then last but not least, assessing and maintaining digital storage of archives, right? So here we go. Now, I've started today with audio because unfortunately audio is the most neglected aspect of audio visual archives. And a lot of people are very much focused on the image, and everything is about the image and then video and so on and so forth. Whereas audio is 80% of what you see, right? And it holds a huge value. Right now, audio again was introduced a lot earlier than moving images, right? So back in the early 1800s or mid 1800s, there was a Frenchman. His name is Edouard Léon Scott de Martinville. He used the phonoautogram, right? And he, on the left right here, he recorded the human voice, right? And he did it by tracing sound waves on smoke blackened paper, right? And he also used glass afterwards. And later, guess what? In 2008, some of these traces that were created, right, were processed from the 1860s, right? They were processed as digital audio files. Now, see, these are some of the trickiest audio files or audio archives you could get your hands on. There are these metal bars, glass plates. You can also get these wax recordings, right? And then, of course, much later came the vinyl, right? So the way now vinyl works a little differently from wax and glass and paper and all of that. And I'll show you a video in a little bit. But we at the National Library and Archives have battled some of these very old late 1800s archives, especially wax audio. I'm sure Hamida would be very interested to know that we have digitalized some very old wax audio recordings. And there's Quran recitals, some music as well. And they were from Jamiat Iskandariyya, believe it or not. So some very old archives, right? That audio archives, especially, that were digitized on audio wax recordings, right? So I'll show you a quick video right now on how this was made, all right, or how to go about digitizing it. Wait, let me check this out right here. There. Okay. Do you see this? Are you seeing this? Can someone?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
Abdullah.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so here, let's go quickly. Right, so this is a recording, right? This is a recording. So someone is now, they're recording right now, okay? So someone is playing the guitar, and that guitar, goes through that, that tool right there, right? And right at the end of the of this recorder is this small needle, and this needle, right? It punctures as the sound waves go through that, that horn. The sound waves keep puncturing the wax recording, right? And as they puncture the wax recording, and the wax recording right there, the cylinder that you see keeps punctured, you get a proper representation of what the audio is, right? And that is how wax recording was made back in the 1800s. And you can see, right, he's blowing through the wax so that the wax would not overlap, and make sure that the recording is happening properly, because the last thing they wanted to do is to have any of that, the wax dust, destroy each other's notes. So here he is. As you can see, he's playing right now. I'll make sure that you can hear the audio. Let me share sound. Okay, and then turn the sound right on here. So he's playing the guitar, right? And all the sound waves are getting translated into the wax cylinder, and he keeps on blowing on the wax cylinder because the needle, every time it penetrates into the wax cylinder, it keeps this slight residue. But the recording you're hearing right now is the actual recording of the wax here. But this one, she ain't stupid, she's got more important things to do. And this is the actual digital recording. So they had a camera going on at the same time, and at the very same time doing a recording of the wax. So now the way to go about digitalizing this wax recording is to play it through the horn again, and then using a stereo microphone or a mono microphone and digitizing it again. All right, so it's pretty incredible, and these are some of the earliest recordings ever made by humankind. All right, so let's go back here. Okay, so after that, of course, came the more sophisticated audio recordings, such as the reel-to-reel, different types. And these quarter-inch, the open reel tapes were very famous in the late 1940s, up to the 1980s. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you can see on the lower right-hand side, there's this museum. There's a link to the Museum of Obsolete Media. Now, this museum is an online museum, and it's incredible. They have made a complete list of any media that is out there. So if you want to go back and you want to know and you want to identify what media type you have, right? The easiest way to go about it, of course, is to look on the tape itself. Like it says right here, Sony. It says the model number, the PR200, right? And you can see that it's a magnetic tape, so you can Google it and find it. And you can also match your finding from the Museum of Obsolete Media. Now, obsolete media means that's gone there. It's obsolete. There are no more hardware that could process this anymore. So, of course, again, today we will discuss how to go about digitalization of, obsolete media. Again, here are more obsolete media CDs have become obsolete, even though they're still available, but again, they're considered to be obsolete. Optical discs, magnetic tapes, right? They're obsolete. I mean, but they're still available, but not as, not as easy as finding a USB flash drive, right? So these are considered obsolete medias. Okay. And then of course we move on to video, right? Again, digitalization is something we will tackle afterwards, but right now we're focused on identification. So identifying video, right? So in the 1950s, I'm not discussing film today at all. I'm discussing video. Film is, I mean, in my opinion, film is still a lot easier to digitize. There are many equipment out there. They're still being made, right? And you can contact me directly, and or you can contact the National Library and Archives, and we can hook you up and you can visit us. But video, on the other hand, is a very seldom topic that is discussed, right? So I wanted to focus on that because video, you better start digitizing video now, because now is your last chance to do it. All right. Again, two links right here on the bottom left. There's Great Bear, and then there's a Museum of Obsolete Media. So if you want to identify media, these are two great links for you to go back to and help you identify what type of format you have, right? So in the 1950s, the National Television System Committee was in the United States, right? They decided to introduce a standard, right? A broadcast standard for analog television broadcast, right? Which was again introduced in the 1950s, 1954 to be precise. Now, the first commercially successful videotape format for broadcast use was right here, the 2-inch. Wait, let me see. Let me just double check right here. Is this thing on the bottom left? That's 2-inch, right? So it's also called a quad, and it's also called the quadruplex. All right, and it was introduced by a company called Ampex. All right, it was introduced in 1956. So so if you see a very big thick thing, a reel, and it's a thin film like a magnetic sheet. It could be a quad, especially if it's big, if it's 2-inch wide, right? It probably is a quad. But then again, you have to again go back to the obsoletemedia.org website and cross-reference and see whether it's truly a quad or a 1-inch tape. And again, with 1-inch tapes, there are many formats as well. Now, afterwards, the BBC also conducted a live demonstration, right, of the Vera apparatus, right, for recording video, and that got scrapped. And afterwards, they went ahead with the quad, with the NTSC quad, but then they had to have their own system, the PAL. Now, the reason why we have two different formats, the NTSC and the PAL, I'll explain that to you in a bit. Now, NTSC is one format of recording, and then there is the PAL. The biggest issue is, or the biggest issue was, back then in the day, was the frequency of the electricity that was fed into people's homes and enterprises. In the United States, it was 110, 120 volts at 60 hertz. That was the frequency of the electricity that was dispersed everywhere. Whereas in Europe and the United Kingdom, right, it was at 50 hertz, okay, and 220 and 240 volts. All right. So that's why they had to have this. They had to have this because broadcast, right, depends heavily on electricity. So that is why we have these differences in video formats. Right, moving on. Now, after the quadruplex, the 2-inch and the 1-inch, the big fat, tape formats, we got the more easy, the easier tape formats that came afterwards, and mostly introduced, unfortunately, by one company, right, that took away the entire market, and Sony, of course. And again, it was in the 1970s where people started to literally begin phasing out film, and film was pretty much restricted, being extremely expensive, right? It was restricted to pretty much the movies or to cinemas, and video, because they need a lot of footage and a lot of stuff to broadcast. They had to find a cheaper solution for that, and that is how tapes were introduced. They're easier to carry, they don't need to be processed, they don't need to be developed. You just record it, and then you just and you broadcast it. Otherwise, film and broadcast is very difficult to do. So Sony launched the first video cassette format called the U-matic, which is right here on the furthest left of the screen. Okay. And it was originally intended for the domestic market, right? It finds a market, but it, however, found a market in the industrial education and broadcast application in 1971. So their main target was actually home video. Their main target was home video, were homes, but then it got accepted into the broadcast engineering industry and moved forward. So U-matic, right, and Betacam especially were mostly targeted for the broadcast industry. I mean, well, not really targeted, but they ended up being used by the broadcast industry. The Betamax, the VCRs, and the VHS, the laser discs, and the optical discs, they were basically, they went into the consumer market, right? So again, identification is extremely important. And because these were heavily created and mass produced, right? So you will find Sony video cassette KCA 60, and on the left here, right on the side, it would say U-matic, and you would know what kind of a tape it is. Again, cross-reference with websites like the museum, the Museum of Obsolete Media. Cross-referencing will help you identify what kind of tape you have. With Betacam, it says on the tape Betacam, right? And that is how you identify. Now, again, with VHS is pretty easy. You have these two glass or plastic, windows. That's the VHS. If you have one, window, then it is basically a Betamax. Betamax and VHS came out at the pretty much at the same time, and they were targeting the home movie industry, right? But VHS, was more stable, and they were a slightly a little cheaper, and it just and could also hold more time as well, recording time. So it got, they did well. Betamax phased out a lot easily, and didn't stand the competition with VHS. So, all right. Now, moving on to, wait a second. Yeah, so now we move on into preservation, right? So you've identified what tapes you have, you've identified what audio, format you have, right? Once you've identified what you have, right, and you've made a list of everything that you have and you know what it is, then comes preservation. It's very important. It's extremely critical that you know how to store what you have, right? To make it available for the generations that are coming, right? So when it comes to magnetic tape, there are two main different types of magnetic tape. Again, audio and video, aside from wax recordings, but audio and video, right? Both were mainly either acetate or polyester-based magnetic tapes. Now, acetate is a lot older, and polyester came afterwards. All right, so how can you identify the difference between what is acetate and what is polyester? Now, when it comes to polyester, they're very prone to decay, right? They're very, very prone to decay, okay? And as you can see here on the left side, the furthermost left side, right? It has some pigments, right? And it has a polymer binder that helps its durability, but it's not as durable as polyester, okay? Now, most likely it will have some form of decay. All right. Once you try to play it, or once you just open the cover, you will see some shrinkage. You will see some, bending. You will see some brittleness, right? And the biggest way, or the biggest, indicator that it's acetate is the smell. It gives off a vinegaring smell, the smell of vinegar. If you open anything and you smell vinegar, you should know that's acetate, whether it's film, whether it's video, whether it's audio. If you smell vinegar, then it's acetate. So how do you store acetate tape or film, right? Now, the IPI, the Image Permanence Institute, and the University of Rochester, the links here that I've given you on the right side, you can go to these, and they've created these incredible guides that are extremely detailed on how to store different media formats. All right, here's a quick glimpse. I mean, I've only put a quick glimpse and a summary of what is there to offer. So if you've got acetate film and it's giving off a vinegar smell, do you store it in a normal room? No. Do you store it in a cool room? It'll be fair, but you won't be able to store it for a very long time. If you put it in a cold room, that's good. If you put it in a freezer, that's even better. Okay, but you have to make sure that the relative humidity of where you're storing the tapes is also low. It should not go more than 50%, right? Maximum relative humidity. And then again, there are ISO recommendations that they've summarized in their guides as well that you can take a look at. With polyester, again, now polyester is incredible. Polyester is very bad for the environment, but it's amazing for the archives. Why? Because polyester does not decay as acetate does, right? Which is incredible for archives, because we want to store our archives for as long as we can for the least amount of money, without spending so much on air conditioning, so without spending, a lot of money on isolating rooms and so on and so forth. And we want it to be durable, right? So polyester came afterwards, and polyester is incredible. And most media formats that came afterwards, right? Especially after the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and by the 2000s, everything became polyester. It's a lot cheaper, it's a lot easier to process, it's a lot easier to create, so on and so forth. And then, of course, came the era of CDs and DVDs. And here, things started to change in terms of archival preservation. How so? Yeah, with polyester, you can freeze your stuff, but with CDs and DVDs, right, you cannot freeze them, because they start to delaminate, right? The protective lacquer, the metallic reflective layer, right, starts to separate and debind from the binder base, from the substrate. So freezing is absolutely not recommended. So if you're living in an area that is freezing, it's not good news for your CDs. You have to keep them warm, right? Or you have to at least keep them in a cold room, but never reach frozen. All right. Keep them in a normal room is not good, but in a cool, cold room is good, right? So whether you live in an area that freezes, it's bad news. Whether you live in the UAE, it's also bad news. You have to have air conditioning, unfortunately. But that's how it is. Okay, now we move on. We finished preservation, right? We move on to audio, video digitalization, right? How do you get this stuff, right, that is in tape format into hardware, right, that can play it? Where can you find this hardware? Okay, now if you were incapable of identifying the kind of tape you have, it'll be very difficult for you to find the hardware that can play it. That is why identification comes first, And then comes how you preserve it, because if you did not preserve it properly, or you're not preserving it properly in a good room, you won't be able to run it. You won't be able to play it. It has to be in a good condition, right? So then comes sourcing machines. Now, you know the tape you have. You have a VHS tape, right? You go online, or you go to the local pawn shop, or you go to any of the, street. So if you're in Abu Dhabi, you go to Electra Street, and you go and you try to find some of those old electronic shops that are there, and try to source a Betamax player, or, a cassette player, or a VHS player. If you're looking to find one, by the way, you can still find it on Dubizzle, like these online apps, local, websites that, sell used hardware. You might get lucky and find a few that are in good condition, right? Otherwise, if you couldn't find it anywhere, you could give eBay a try, and you'd be surprised how good of machines you could find on eBay, by the way. So that's how you source your machines, right? You've identified the type of tape you have, and then you went online, you found that hardware, you bought it, and made sure that it's in good condition when you're buying it, and that, it's guaranteed that it's going to work. Or you go to the shop, you take the video VHS tape with you, and you play it then and there. You buy the thing, and you come home, and then we move on to the next step. But before we move on to the next step of digitalization, let's talk about how we can record it, right? Now, these are the players. This is a player, and this is a player, and this is a player. This is the hardware you need in order to play your tapes, okay? But then how do you digitize that tape? Because, by the way, if you don't digitize it today, whilst these machines are available, right? If you don't do it today, it's either now or never, because these machines are deteriorating, and they're very difficult to find that are in good condition. And when we get to the maintenance part, I'll tell you why it's very important that we digitize these tapes today and not wait for another 5 years or 10 years. Okay, but moving on further, so you sort the machines, and then you need something like a black magic, and what that does is you get a video out from these machines, or an audio out, especially from this machine, for example, and then you plug it into these I/O modules. Okay, you can find them from Black Design. You connect them to I/O modules, and then from here, with a USB plug or USB cable, you can connect it, or FireWire, or what's it called, Thunderbolt cable. You can connect it to your PC or your Mac, and you can start recording the audio, or you can start recording your video. So then comes the issue of, okay, so I can get a signal on my screen, I can see the video, right? And I can see the video, but my biggest issue now is, okay, what file format do you use? What resolution should I use, right? And here we get into a totally different, kind of forms. And these are called the digitalization guidelines. There are so many out there. The three biggest ones that I would recommend, and actually a fourth one as well, there's a Metamorphose in the Netherlands. They have some digitization guidelines. You have FADGI in the United States. They have many guidelines. You have the International Association of Sound and Audiovisual Archives. They have their guidelines as well. And then, of course, ISO has one too. It's the ISO TR 13028, but it's not as extensive as the one FADGI offers, for example. And why you may ask? For a very simple reason. Sony did not, or the companies that created these tapes, right? They did not have a lot of information published, right? What is happening, the broadcast signal that is coming out, and there's a lot that was just, in hidden training, modules that they launched back then in the 70s. And a lot of those people are retired now, and getting a hand on those documents is very difficult. So FADGI did an incredible job. And if you go to their website, and depending on what you're trying to digitize, right, you'll find the exact guideline for that. And then, of course, if you want to discuss what you found in their guidelines further, they have an audiovisual working group where you can sit down with a team of experts and, discuss exactly what it is that you're trying to do and how you think your way could be better for you, right? So these are the guidelines, and guidelines help you decide what resolution to digitize on, what compression to use, what file format to use, all of that. Guidelines assist you with that. And then, of course, we move on to maintenance. Now, we live in an incredible world where if you just Google something, you'll find incredible videos, you'll find incredible guides. It's we live in a generous world, a world generous in information, and especially us archivists, we're always trying to help each other out, right? If you go on YouTube and you type in the name of your hardware, right, and you say I've got a jam, right, and or you get to the forums and you say I've got a jam and I don't know how to plug in my tape and I don't know what's happening, and you have a huge community that will help you out. So you'll find all types of different guides and video and guidelines and video detailing all the different parts that you could find in a specific hardware. And you remember when I said earlier how important it is that we digitize, or we start digitizing today, because look at these small little parts right here, right? Do you see these plastic parts? They are they're very easy and they're very prone to breaking and cracking. And once they're gone, yes, we do have 3D printers and we can make them again, right? But it's quite a hassle to make them again. And on top of that, like, you'd have to literally, like, see this part, for example, it's a helical gear. And if you want to recreate that, you're going to need a 3D scanner and all sorts of things to scan it and then put it together and then, print it in 3D. All right, now that's the easy stuff. The difficult stuff are the PCBs that you see here. These have these chips in them, right? You can recreate the entire PCB. You can make it, right, from scratch. But then again, the problem is the chip has programming in it, and you can still find the chip, but the problem is you won't be able to, flash it with the same software that was installed from the mother company, and which makes it extremely difficult. And a lot of these companies back then, what ended up happening is they stopped production, and I'm not quite sure they still have the guides. I mean, there's some groups out there, some hardware do have these guides, right? And the software is still, available, but again, they're in forms and you can't really, and there are so many different model types, and you can never be sure to find that software to flash your ROMs and flash your chips properly and reinstall the programming that was on them. So literally, the sooner you start digitizing tapes, right, the better, because finding this hardware in 10 years and 20 years will be extremely difficult, extremely difficult. So, film, on the other hand, is a lot easier. You've got a source of light, you can see it, right? And digitizing it, you can digitize film using a phone, right? Phones have cameras nowadays, and you can, if you can see, you can digitize it. It's easy. You can, you don't even have to digitize it if it's preserved properly, and especially if it's polyester based, it could live for 1,000 years. As a matter of fact, film can preserve your digital media. And especially if it's polyester film, it can live for a lot longer than any hard disk. So there's nothing to be worried about. not much to be worried about, especially if it's polyester film. Acetate film, I would say otherwise that, you better get going in digitizing, but with video, you better get started, and you better get started as soon as possible. All right. And then comes the software. Again, the good thing with Blackmagic is once you buy their hardware, there is some software that comes with their hardware. And what that software does is it helps you control your deck, right? And it also helps you digitize, but to a certain extent, right? It's not a very, it's not the best software you could use, but at least it comes with some software. Now, if you want free software, you have Audacity, you have FFmpeg, and you have Shotcut. These are free. Audacity is a free-based software, right? You can download it and you can start recording audio. FFmpeg, right? If you're using Blackmagic Designer, if you're using something to record the video, what FFmpeg can do is, again, we talked about standards earlier, right? So if you want to convert, say, for example, an uncompressed video file to, say, for example, an H.265 for MXF OP1A, you could use FFmpeg, and it can convert that file for you, right? It's called transcoding. So FFmpeg is a free tool again. It's line code, right? But it's a free tool that can allow you to do that. And then of course there's Shotcut in case, sometimes what happens is you're digitizing a videotape and then it jams and then or it cuts, and then you take the video out and you put it together with tape or whatever cementing you're using, and you put the tape together and then you continue recording. You don't you rewind the entire tape. Now, in order to put the tape together back again as in one tape, you need something like Shotcut or Avid or Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro or DaVinci Resolve, right? And again, Shotcut being the only one that is free, right? Among others, but Shotcut is pretty famous and reliable as free software. So you need to put it back together. And then, of course, Avid, Adobe, Final Cut, and DaVinci, they all have dedicated, software for professional editing, for professional recording, and so on and so forth, to help you do that. So that's digitalization and transcoding. Now, so we've discussed how to identify, we've discussed how to preserve, we've discussed how to maintain and choose hardware, play the tapes, right? We've also discussed how to digitize, right? Now, after you've begun digitizing, right? After you've begun digitizing and you reach hundreds and hundreds of tapes, or you reach quite a bulk of tapes, right, that you've digitized, you'll need some software that will help you manage that or make it a lot easier for you to go back to and search for what it is that you have, right? And say, for example, you have 3,000 hours of video, you have 100,000 hours of video that you've digitized. How can you find a specific person? How can you find, a shot within all that hours? Will you sit down and look through your entire archive? Well, you could, but there's an easier way to go about it, right? Now, here are a few digital asset and media asset management solutions that are out there, right? Some are over the counter, which means that you can just buy them and install them and start running them, right, locally. And you can start managing your entire database of videos. And as you can see right here in the center, you can start writing the data. As you're digitizing, you just ingest all the metadata and all the information that is about the video that you can find, right? And then there is the other way, which is a cloud-based solution. Now, when it comes to cloud-based solution, you have the Adobe Experience Cloud, right? You have OpenText, you have Q3, Cube 365, VizRT. VizRT can be both on and off cloud, right? Mimir can be on and off cloud. Dalit can be on and off cloud. CatDV can be on and off cloud. Backlight has to be on cloud. Dominion has to be on cloud, right? And now, what do you gain from being on the cloud? You gain something like Amazon's AI and Amazon's services, or Google's AI and Google service, or Microsoft's Azure AI and services. What does that do for you? First of all, if you have faces that you recognize them once, and that's it. You can apply your facial recognition to all your videos, and then finding that person in all the video files that you have will be a lot easier for you to retrieve. Speech to text. If someone's talking and someone comes to you and says, "Hey, Abdullah, can you find me the day? Remember that guy who was in the video and he said, let's go to Lebanon, for example." It'll be very difficult for you to sit and watch hundreds and thousands of hours of video. But if you already converted through AI and cloud everything that was said into text, it'll be a lot easier for you to search for that exact phrase. So these web services, offer AI, and they offer a lot of that help you retrieve that data. Audio to text conversion, facial recognition. It also, they can also detect whether people are happy in the video or they're sad, or the content of your video, or what kind of videos there are. Are there landscapes, trees? What's happening in the video? They'll give you. These services give you a lot of information that help you. And on top of that, you can also access all your database, all your videos anywhere in the world, because you do a lot of the storage on the servers that are given and provided to you by Amazon or Google or Microsoft, right? And you can do a lot of the computing remotely. You don't have to have software that is dedicated for content delivery. It pretty much comes with it. Storage, networking, servers, development, of mobile applications based on your archives. All of that is basically, readily available, and at the convenience of your fingertips. So a lot of these services that are available that are cloud-based, they're pretty, I won't say they're very, very cheap, but I won't say they're very, very expensive given what you're getting. Because if you're going to start from scratch and start, acquiring your own servers and doing all the security all by yourself, it'll get really, really expensive very, very fast. But then again, security is extremely important, right? Do you want all your, information, all your videos, if they're sensitive, do you want them to be out there in the public? It won't. There is security, but do you want to take that risk or not? Again, that is something you have to discuss with your collection owners and yourself. And this concludes our lecture today and our celebration on this beautiful day that was, designed and dedicated by UNESCO to celebrate audiovisual heritage, a window to the world. I am Abdulla Mohamed Al Bastaki, and it was a pleasure to have you all.
Thank you, Abdallah. This is Alexander. I have a brief question. Very, very quality information, and we can feel how passionate you are about the cause. The question is, what's your take on storage? What are the ways to preserve, some of the materials you mentioned, after such a painstaking process of digitizing? What's your take on the cloud? Would you trust the clouds? Which clouds? Would you create the on-site sovereign independent storage? And I understand that's perhaps a very broad topic, but if you can just share some thoughts about the direction. If I narrow down my question, let's say this cloud storage, yes or no? How do we store these digitally preserved treasures?
Right. So these are mine. Okay. So this is what I do. On a personal level, what I do is I make a backup. I mean, I buy the tapes. I mean, I buy the, hard disks myself, right? And our archive, again, my own personal archive is small, right? So I would buy it and it's a one-time expense. I'd buy 2 or 3 hard disks. It's a one-time expense. You don't have to sit and pay for it every year. And, but that's the thing, you own it and it's yours. And there's also the other risk with cloud is they can change pricing. YouTube and YouTube Premium, right, just increases the prices from 30 dirhams a month to what now? 49, I think, dirhams a month. I don't know. I don't recommend they raise the prices again. So and so you never know whether the prices are going to be stable or not. So I believe in storage and self-storage. But then again, if I need to retrieve data, then I might consider cloud. But does it outweigh the security risks? I might agree and not agree at the same time. So it depends on what you're doing. However, if you have your archive on a disk-based storage, it's just stuck there. Okay, you can have your own server, but will you be able to afford a very fast server? Do you have extra backups of your server? All of that comes into play. And then the other thing you have to keep in mind, how fast are you accessing those files? If you're accessing that hard disk or those hard drives day in and day out, within 3 years, you have to go and get new hard disks and transfer everything that you have, right? And that is not something that is a risk with cloud storage, because cloud storage today, they use massive, highly secure server storage, solutions that are, almost bulletproof. And but then again, you have to, it depends on the collection you have, and the and the value of what you have, where and how you go, the cost of it. And the cost is varying, because even with cloud storage, you have to understand how often you're going to use and how often you're going to retrieve that archive. If you're going to retrieve it once or never, just store it. It's very cheap on the cloud. And it's also very cheap for you if you buy the hard disk, because you can keep that very same hard disk for many, many, many years, right? Without worrying. But if you're going to use that hard disk often, or if you're going to use that cloud often, the price goes up. Again, these are some of the things that you have to keep in mind when choosing storage. All right, I have a question right here. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Absolutely, Abdulla.
Welcome. All right, so we have a question here from Ahmed Sumai, Ahmed Osman Khalid. It says, how long does it take to store videos and audio CDs in institutions, companies, television, and radio station? I don't quite understand the question, but let's see. How long does it take to store videos and audio CDs in institutions, companies? If the question is, how long does it take to digitize an audio CD? It depends on the files that are on the audio CD, and it depends also on the driver that has the read capacity, and also depends on the read speed that is of the CD itself. Remember back in the day when we had these CDs and you could see it says 2x, and some CD drives afterwards came out and said something like 600x. What does it mean? It means that it can read 600 times faster. So a lot of these come into play. But then again, a good rule of thumb is, you have an hour worth of video footage on on a DVD, you know, a good rule of thumb would be you need an hour. Why? For a very simple reason. You're going to plug in the disk and then you're going to copy that disk. Right? It might be fast, it might be slow, but then again, you need to transcode that disk. Transcoding can take time. But then again, the faster your servers are, the faster your processing speed is, the faster you'll be able to digitize. I hope that answers your questions. Okay. For the long-term preservation, audio cassettes and VHS tapes. Okay, so you don't know if you here. Let me do a quick share. I'll show you. So the question is, how long can you store VHS tapes? Now, with VHS tapes, they came at an era when they were created in polyester. Polyester can live for, if you store it in a cold room, polyester could reach up to anywhere between 500 to 1,000 years if you keep the relative humidity stable and you keep the temperature stable. So these two factors, if they're very stable, right, and they meet the ISO recommendations, you know, you could easily reach 1,000 years from the date of creation of that tape. That's for VHS and recent audio tapes. But then again, if it was acetate, it's different. Acetate, if it's stored properly in a freezer from the day it was created, would live for anywhere between 100 to 300 years. But if it was put in a shoebox, unfortunately, well, not really audio tape, but I would say reel-to-reel acetate, it would live, freezing would stop the deterioration. But if the deterioration has already happened, it's like rust. You can't really, you can stop rust, but you cannot go back in time and recover what was deteriorated. I hope that answers your question. We have another quick question. How do you make these amazing assets available to public? What's your take on social media for this? How else you build community around this heritage? Right. Now, when it comes to access, a lot of it has to do with, do you own the collections that were bestowed to you as an archivist? And do you own the rights to them? With National Library and Archives, we have quite a lot of material that we are in the capacity and have the ability to share with the public. So if you do make a request for audio, video, or images or documents, you're more likely to get a lot of archives from us. And we encourage you to do so. It's very easy. You send an email to cs at, let me type it down, cs@nla.ae, and we will help you out and hook you up with video, images, and so on and so forth. And but again, rights is very important. And at the National Library and Archives, we're very, very strict, and we're very strict on preserving rights. And we also we have a lot of archives that we have no rights of, but we encourage archival of them because we're the go-to industry, we're the go-to government organization when it comes to preservation. And regardless whether we get the rights or we don't, it doesn't matter. What matters to us the most is preserving history.
Thank you so much, Abdullah. As we are doing an initiative primarily based on social media. So I wanted to ask you about what's your take on social media, and you mentioned how public can access your archives. I wanted to ask on the flip side, do you have any initiatives where you would be interested to gather, let's say, archival materials from public, or let's say our project, we document architecture, around Abu Dhabi and broader the UAE, if there is a way we can somehow contribute to any kind of archiving initiatives. As we already collaborate with universities and contribute to research, but we're wondering if there is any use for the visual representation of Abu Dhabi urban fabric,
Right.
sourced by the public.
Right. If you want access to some of our archives, right, we have AGDA, which is the Arabian Gulf Digital Archives, and a lot of our archives was published on the AGDA platform. As you can see there, I've put in the name of the initiative into the chat, and you can easily gain access to it through the hyperlink that is available there. Let me copy this as well and put it in the chat. But you can see, a lot of this. You can go there, right, and you can see a lot of some of the images that we have, visits and so on and so forth. And, they're available online. So a lot of our archives, video and film, they're available online on the AGDA platform, right? But in terms of initiatives that are out there, we're more than happy to discuss it.
Thank you. Apologies, my line disconnected. Thank you so much.
So
That's
you're
amazing.
almost welcome. You're almost welcome. You're almost welcome. All right. So I guess this will be it for today. I hope and wish everyone a great celebration, and wish you all the best on whatever whatever projects you're going to be getting yourselves into. And you can always reach me directly should you have any questions, right? And this is my my email address. And please do not hesitate to send me an email, and I'll try my best to be able to answer any of your questions.